In this video, I'm going to cover Atari 2600 emulation on the PC version of Retroarch. I really like the Atari 2600. It was the first system that I grew up playing games on, with Pac-Man, Missile Command, just some of those really old classics, and to this day I just still really enjoy going back and playing them. That being said, my Atari 2600 is still stuck on RF only, making it really hard for me to use the original hardware to do so. But thanks to emulation, I don't have to work with that limitation. I could just play my games however I want to. And one of the easiest ways to do so is through Retroarch. So let's go ahead and dive in. So to get started with Atari 2600 emulation on the PC version of Retroarch, you need to install the PC version of Retroarch. This video is a continuation of my How to Install Retroarch for PC video guide, so go back to this video to get Retroarch set up, some interesting settings in place, and then you can continue on with this guide. Link in the description below or the upper right hand corner of the screen. But once you have Retroarch installed and ready to go, you need to source some Atari 2600 games. If you have a physical collection of Atari games, you can dump those with a hardware dumper. I believe you can dump things from the Atari flashback consoles from @Games, and there are some Atari collections that I believe just used ROM files on older consoles that you could just rip straight over. Alternatively, you could always resort to the shady parts of the net and just do it that way. As always, I don't really give a crap which way you do it, but don't ask for illegal download links because I will not give them to you, and I will delete your comments because no. But once you have the games sourced, you can literally place them anywhere you want on your computer. It doesn't matter. Set up an emulation folder directory that you want to use, put your games there, you're good to go. For my tutorial series, I made a folder named Retroarch Games, and that's just where I'm going to put my Atari 2600 games to use during this tutorial. But once you have your games sourced and ready to go, we can boot into Retroarch. Once Retroarch's booted, the first thing we need to do is download our Atari 2600 core. So to do this, you go over to the online updater, core downloader, and just scroll down to Atari, and we are looking for Atari 2600 Stella, and then just press enter. And once the core is downloaded, we're free to begin loading up content, and one method of doing this is to go up to load content, navigate to the directory that you have your game stored in. So for me on the desktop, it's C, users, user profile, desktop, Retroarch, Retroarch Games, Atari 2600. And then from here, I could just select a game and begin playing it. I don't personally care for this method a whole lot. It's kind of slow and long-winded. So what I like to do instead is make a games playlist. And there's a bunch of different ways to do this on PC, but the way I prefer is to press F5 on my keyboard to bring up the Retroarch desktop menu. And after the desktop menu loads, it pops up this wonderful little welcome thing here, and we just say, hey, get out of our face. Over on the left, there is a playlist and file browser, content browser tab here. So here is where we're going to right-click, new playlist, and type in Atari, space, 2600, and then press enter. And that'll give us a nice little wood grain Atari 2600 playlist entry right here on the left. So select this, and then right-click in the main box here, and tell it to add a folder. And then navigate to where you have your Retroarch games, your Atari 2600 games, and tell it to select the folder. Then it'll ask you for the core, so that is going to be Stella, and the database is Atari 2600. And once you have these set, click OK, and all of your Atari 2600 games should pop up automatically. There is one more optional step if you want to do it, and that is to help make your playlist a little bit prettier. So if you want thumbnails, title screens, screenshots, other things like that, you can right-click on your Atari 2600 playlist entry and tell it to download all thumbnails for this playlist. And it will begin searching the online database to see if it can find any matches for your games. Typically, it's looking for the name of the game followed by a region code, so you might need to rename things if it doesn't find your stuff. So for me, it was able to find all of the box arts for my games. But again, it might not find them for you. In that case, you could just right-click on a game, edit it, put the name and a region code, and try again by right-clicking download thumbnail, and it might pop up. Alternatively, you could manually download box arts from places like GameFAQs, and then just drag them into this box art window preview right here, and it should apply them to the playlist. But once you have the playlist set up the way you want it, just go ahead and close out of the desktop menu, and then click on Retroarch and full screen it with the F key on your keyboard, And if you're not on the main menu, just go ahead and press backspace on your keyboard until you get there, because we just need to restart Retroarch for that Atari 2600 playlist to show up. So there's a nice little Restart Retroarch tab here. And once the program restarts, there is now an Atari 2600 playlist entry here on the left with all of our games and box arts if we made the effort to include them. Now to play a game, all you need to do is click on it and tell it to run. And there we go, Atari 2600 games up and running on the PC version of Retroarch. Now, just a quick note on controls. If you have a controller plugged into your computer, it should automatically detect it and allow you to use it for Atari 2600 games. Alternatively, you can use the keyboard for Atari 2600. It's not overly complicated to do so. But I prefer to use a controller, so I'm just going to plug one in real quick. And there we go, Retroarch automatically detected it, and I'm free to begin playing Atari 2600 games. And you can do this by pressing the start button on your controller to begin a game with default settings. So for those of you that actually own an Atari 2600, you know that there are a bunch of hardware switches on the system itself. And those are all emulated on controllers, which is really awesome. So just to give a quick example, if you press F1 on your keyboard, it'll take you into the Retroarch quick menu. And then we can scroll down to controls here. Port 1 controls. And this will let us look at what our controls are set to. Our select button is assigned to the back button on Xbox controllers, or view button as it's known now, screw that crap. Start is the reset button. Now our bumpers and triggers are for the difficulty selection between the left and right players. And we can even change between the color and black and white modes with our thumbstick clicks, so it's pretty cool. So just a quick example of that, if we click on it, we can change between black and white and full color. Pretty cool stuff. But this is, if you want to change the different game modes that are available, you just press your select button, and that lets you choose between 2-player modes, 1-player modes, difficulty levels, and then when you get to the one you want, you just press start and begin playing. It's really intuitive. I like it a lot. So for those of you looking to get Atari 2600 games up and running on your computer, that is basically the process. You just need to get the games, download the core, and then begin playing them. And if you want them to look prettier as you do so, you can make that playlist just to make your life a heck of a lot easier. But let's go ahead and talk about some of the more advanced core options available to us within the Stella core. So once again, you press F1 on your keyboard to go into the Retroarch quick menu. And this time we're going to scroll down to options. And our first option is to change our console display, and this lets you change between NTSC, PAL, CCAM, 50Hz, 60Hz, just all of the different settings available. It's set to auto by default, which should be pretty good for most use cases, but if you need to manually set it, you could do so here. Next, we have a palette color display, and this lets us choose between a couple of different custom color palettes. Next, we have TV effects, and this is to simulate different input type. You can leave it on off to have the sharpest pixels possible. You can set it to composite video, which will give you a bunch of composite artifacts and simulate a composite CRT. For Atari 2600, this looks really good to me because, again, my Atari 2600 is RF only. I've never modded it to have better video output, so this still looks better than what my real system is capable of, but being a little more authentic, it's kind of cool to me. And then, of course, S-Video if you want it to be a little bit better. And then RGB for the RGB modded look. And then badly adjusted if you just really want to have... This is more like the RF experience in my book. Really bad. It's fun. But again, if you just want to have the sharpest output possible, just leave it off. Next, we have NTSC and PAL aspect percentages, so... This lets you change the width of your game display. Next, we have crop horizontal overscan, and this will cut off the borders of the screen to get rid of some garbage junk that might appear in the horizontal overscan. So this is more of a per game thing. In Pac-Man, it doesn't need to be on. Other games, it does. So for the games you need it on, go ahead and set it to on, and then you can save a per game override. So that way every time you load up that game, it's on, but it won't be on for other games. Next, we have stereo sound, so you can enable or disable stereo sound for the Atari 2600. These next options are really fun for authenticity's sake, and it is phosphor blend, and this is to kind of give a ghosting effect that was present on the Atari 2600 on old CRTs. And I really like this effect. It just seriously makes it seem a little bit more authentic. I like to boost it up to I don't know. Which one did I care for? Yeah. So 70, maybe 65. Yeah, I think 65 is my sweet spot personally to kind of remembering how it was as a kid. We had this old janky CRT. It was fantastic. And the last option is for paddle joypad sensitivity, so it's set to 3 by default. I've never had issues with this, but you can increase it or decrease it as you need, all the way up to 20, down to 1. But that's going to do it as far as core options are concerned, and once again, if you have options that you want to set on a per game basis, you can save those by going into Manage Core Options and saving the game option file. Alternatively, if you just want to have one setting for every Atari 2600 game, you could save them as a core override, so that way every time you load up an Atari 2600 game, these are the options that are going to greet you. But that's going to do it for Atari 2600 emulation. This one is really simple to get set up, but if you happen to have any questions, feel free to ask me in the comment section below, and I'll do my best to try to help you out. But now, if you could all do me a huge favor, please be sure to hit that like or dislike button, just depending on how much you like today's tutorial. And if you haven't done so already, be sure to hit that sub button so you can see when new tutorials, reviews, other random nonsense on my channel goes live. Really helps us keep this place going, and we can't thank you all enough for helping us get so close to reaching our goals. Like, y'all rock. Thank you. If you'd like to further help support the channel, you could also check out that join button here on YouTube or the Patreon link in the bottom right hand corner of the screen. A little really goes a long way to keeping this place going, and we are just super grateful to all of our champions who have done so. You all are freaking rock stars. You're keeping this place going. Just thank you all so much. But that's going to do it for this one. So until next time, my wonderful internet peeps, stay awesome, and we will see you all back next video.